It started in the smallest way. Not in a thunderstorm or some movie-worthy scene, just a Tuesday afternoon when the air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and paper dust. The bookstore cafe was half empty. I sat in my usual corner, a seat near the window where the light was soft but never direct, where I could watch people come and go without anyone watching me back. My notebook was open, but the page stayed blank. A half-written text sat on my phone too, unsent. I'd written, "Hope you're okay," 3 times and deleted it 3 times. That was when she walked in. She didn't belong in a student cafe, not with her sharp jacket folded neatly over her arm, or the way her hair was tied back like she was here only on accident. But she noticed me almost immediately. Noticed, and then looked away as if she hadn't. It took a second before memory caught up. "Professor Hale?" I said it under my breath, more a thought escaping than a greeting. She turned her head, half-smile tugging like she'd been caught off guard. "I thought I recognized you." She ordered tea, black, no sugar. Same as always. I remembered because I used to run out after lectures and bring her one when she stayed late grading. She never asked? I just did it. When she passed my table, she stopped. Not for long, just a small pause. Her fingers brushed the strap of her bag. "Still writing?" she asked. I shrugged. "Trying. Blank pages win most days." Her smile softened but didn't last. She glanced at the notebook, at the coffee I hadn't touched. "Grades define you," she said, her old line. It used to sting back in her class. This time, I looked right at her. "Character defines me." The words came out before I thought. My hand tightened around the pen, like I'd written them instead of said them. Her eyes held mine for a beat too long. Then she laughed, quiet, the way someone laughs when they're impressed but won't admit it. She tapped the edge of my notebook with one finger. "Maybe that's true." I wanted to say more, but silence stretched between us, thick but not uncomfortable. I folded the napkin under my cup, corner to corner, like it mattered. She noticed. Her eyes flicked down, then back to mine. "You still overthink everything," she said softly. "Better than not thinking at all," I muttered. That earned another faint smile. She adjusted the strap of her bag and said she had to go, some meeting she couldn't be late for. But she lingered. Just long enough that I wondered if she was waiting for me to say something else. I didn't. When she finally walked out, I stared at the empty chair across from me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about the unsent text on my phone. I thought about her hands. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she smiled. The way her voice had softened, just a fraction, when she said maybe that's true. I told myself it didn't mean anything. That she was just being kind, the way teachers sometimes are to old students they'd bump into by chance. But when I packed up to leave, my phone lit up. One new message. Her name. "Next time, don't let me drink alone." I sat there, staring at the screen, napkin folded perfectly in my hand. I didn't answer her message right away. I stared at it too long, then shoved the phone into my pocket like it burned. But 2 days later, I walked back into that same bookstore cafe. She was there already, seated at the window this time. Tea steaming in front of her, sleeves pushed back, hair a little loose like the day had worn her down. When she saw me, she tilted her head. "I was starting to think you didn't believe in second chances." "I usually don't," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "But here I am." We didn't rush the conversation. That was the strange thing about her. Most people, you feel the need to fill the silence, to prove you belong in it. With her, silence felt like part of the language. She noticed me glancing at her tea and smirked. "Still coffee?" "Still coffee." I hesitated, then added, "But I remember you always said tea was less about taste and more about time. It forces you to slow down." Her eyebrows lifted, surprised I remembered. She wrapped her hands around the cup, staring at the steam like it carried an answer. "I guess I still need that reminder." We drifted into old memories. Her class, late nights finishing essays, the way she'd scribble in margins instead of grades, words like thoughtful, or unfinished. She said she thought I hated that. I didn't hate it, I admitted. My thumb rubbed the rim of my cup. I hated that you were right. That pulled a quiet laugh from her, but her eyes didn't leave mine. For a moment, she looked younger. Or maybe I just saw her differently, stripped of the authority she used to carry. It felt wrong to notice. Like catching yourself staring too long at a painting you're not supposed to touch. She set her cup down carefully. You know this. She gestured between us, vague, almost embarrassed. It's not exactly simple. I nodded. The unspoken things were louder than her words. The age gap, the way she was once the person deciding my grades, the fact that someone might see us and misunderstand. Or understand too well. Still, I found myself asking, then why text me? Her fingers tapped the table, restless. Finally she said, because sometimes you want to sit with someone who remembers a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. That sat in me heavy. I thought about all the half-written texts I never sent, all the versions of myself I kept hidden. Maybe she carried her own unsent words too. We didn't touch, not really. But when I reached for the sugar packet, my hand brushed hers. Neither of us pulled away immediately. Just that small pause, enough to shift the air. She smiled, small but real. Careful. Tea makes people slower, but braver too. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I thought we'd keep meeting at the cafe, quiet and safe, but that wasn't how it went. She asked if I could help carry a box of books from her office. Just for a minute, she said. Casual, like it didn't matter. It mattered. Her office was the same as I remembered, shelves stacked uneven, papers in soft piles that seemed carefully messy. She still kept the same chipped mug on the desk, the one with faded lettering, World's Okayest Teacher. I tried not to stare at it, but she caught me. You remember everything, she said, half smiling, almost uneasy. Not everything, I answered. But I did. Too much. While she sorted through the box, I leaned against the edge of her desk, pretending not to notice the nearness, the faint trace of her perfume. She brushed hair from her face, and the silence between us stretched. I wanted to say something, about how strange it felt to be here again, how different it all looked now, but before I could, the door opened. Another professor stepped in. Tall, glasses, the type who didn't miss details. He greeted her, glanced at me, then at the box. Ah. Student helper? I felt the word land heavier than it should. Student. Even now, years later. She answered quickly, too quickly. Just an old student, helping out. Her tone was light, practice, but her eyes flicked toward me in a way that didn't match. I nodded, said nothing, let the word old sink into me. The professor left after a brief exchange. The door clicked shut. She exhaled, shoulders dropping. That was awkward. I shrugged, though my chest felt tight. Guess that's what we are, right? Awkward. Her laugh was short, almost sad. She pushed the box closer to the wall. You shouldn't take it that way. It's just, people notice things. They assume. I wanted to ask, and what would they assume? But the words stuck. Instead, I watched her tuck a loose paper into the box, her fingers brushing the edge like she needed something to do. My hand twitched, almost reaching for hers, then stopping. She looked up at me. Eyes steady, but the rest of her, hands, posture, the way she bit her lip, gave her away. I stepped closer. Just enough. Close enough to notice the faint line at the corner of her mouth, the kind you only see when someone has smiled 1,000 times in their life. She didn't move. For a second, it felt like gravity shifted, like if I leaned even slightly, the space between us would vanish. Then she blinked, stepped back. We should, finish this later, she said, her voice thinner than before. The moment cracked, but didn't break. I left the office with the shape of her silence pressed into me, the ghost of something unfinished still hanging in the air. We didn't plan to walk together. It just happened. The sky was fading into that soft gray where the streetlights start to hum, and she said she needed fresh air after another long meeting. I offered to walk her to the train. The city felt quieter than usual. Just a low thrum of cars, the rhythm of our shoes on the sidewalk. She kept her hands buried in her coat pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, like she was trying to fold herself smaller. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but instead I commented on the weather. Pointless. Safe. Then, halfway down the block, she stopped. Sat on an empty bench under a crooked lamp. 5 minutes, she said, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath all day. I sat beside her. Not too close. Not far enough either. Her eyes followed the cars, but her words came softer, almost to herself. You know, I used to think teaching kept me from disappearing. That if I left a mark on enough students I'd matter. But lately, she cut off, pressing her lips tight. I didn't know what to say. My hand folded into my lap, gripping the edge of my jeans. Finally I murmured, You mattered. To me, at least. She turned her head slowly. The lamp caught the faint tiredness around her eyes. Something shifted, like the wall she kept between us had a crack running through it. Her voice was low. You shouldn't say that. Why not? Because. She paused, searching for words that didn't arrive. Because you're too young to carry what I've let slip. And I'm too old to pretend it means nothing. I let the silence do the work. The kind that stretches, heavy but honest. Finally I said, You think this is about age? She didn't answer. Her jaw tightened. She tapped her thumb against her knee, restless, like she wanted to argue but couldn't. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You texted me. You asked me not to let you drink alone. You let me sit in your office, just us. You don't do that unless. Her breath caught, barely audible. She shook her head, but not firmly. Unless what? I stopped. My throat tightened. The words were there, crowding, but saying them out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. She shifted closer, almost imperceptible, but enough. I felt the warmth of her shoulder near mine, and every cell in me screamed to close the distance. Her hand slipped out of her pocket, resting on the bench between us. Not touching, but close enough that if I moved even slightly, she turned to me. Her eyes were steady, unreadable, but softer than I'd ever seen. And then she asked, quiet enough I almost didn't hear, What do you really want from me? After that night on the bench, I thought things would shift. Not explode into something obvious, but tilt, quietly, steadily, toward whatever was waiting between us. But the next time I showed up at the cafe, she wasn't there. Not that day, not the next. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Then I started checking at different hours, walking past her office, scanning the corner table near the window. Nothing. When she finally texted, the message was brief. Busy week. Take care of yourself. No smiley, no half invitation. Just distance. I tried to ignore it, but the silence stretched. My phone stayed heavy in my pocket. I typed replies I never sent. Miss you at the cafe. Delete. Is everything okay? Delete. Days turned into a week. Then 2. I told myself to stop looking for her. But one evening, leaving the library late, I saw her outside the building. Not alone. She was standing with a man, slightly older, neat suit, the kind of posture that suggested permanence. They weren't touching, but the familiarity in her body language hit me harder than if they had been. I slowed, almost stopped, but she didn't see me. She laughed at something he said. A laugh lighter than the one she gave me, like it belonged to another version of her. I walked past before she could notice. My chest didn't crack open, it just tightened. Like air pressed out of me without warning. Later that night, I stared at the folded napkin I'd kept in my notebook, the one I'd folded the day she first texted me. I thought about the way she'd asked what I wanted. How I hadn't answered. Maybe this was her answer. Still, I couldn't let it go. I sat with my phone glowing in the dark, typing again. I saw you tonight. Delete. I thought we were. Delete. What finally stayed was just her name on the screen, blank after it. Like saying her name was enough, or maybe too much. I didn't send it. The next day, I went to the cafe anyway. Ordered coffee, sat by the window, tried to look like I belonged there without waiting for someone. The chair across from me stayed empty. The tea kettle whistled behind the counter, someone else's drink. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I folded the napkin again, sharper this time, until the edges frayed. And for the first time, I didn't stay until closing. It was late when she finally called. Not text. Call. Her voice was thin, like she'd argued with herself before dialing. Are you awake? I was. I always was. She asked if I could stop by. Said she didn't want to explain over the phone. Her apartment was smaller than I'd imagined. Neat, but lived in. A stack of papers on the counter, half a bottle of wine by the sink. She offered me tea, then changed her mind and poured herself a glass of water instead. We sat at the small kitchen table. No music, no TV. Just the hum of the fridge. For a while, she avoided my eyes. Kept folding the corner of a paper napkin between her fingers. I recognized the gesture. It was what I used to do. Finally, she said it. That man you saw, he's not what you think. He's my ex-husband. He still shows up sometimes. Wants to believe there's something left. She looked up then, face unreadable. There isn't. I nodded, but the knot in my chest didn't loosen. You could have told me. I know. She swallowed. But then I'd have to admit I cared what you thought. That stopped me. The silence after it was so sharp I could hear my heartbeat. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, searching her face. You do care? Her hands stilled on the napkin. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, almost like a confession. More than I should. The room shifted with those words. Everything I'd been carrying, the half-texts, the waiting, the empty chairs, suddenly had weight and shape. I keep telling myself this is wrong, she whispered. That you deserve someone your age. That people will talk. That it'll end badly. Her voice cracked. But then you look at me like that, and I don't want to be careful anymore. I reached across the table, slowly, giving her the chance to pull back. She didn't. My fingers brushed hers, and she let them stay. I don't want careful either, I said. The words felt simple, not rehearsed. I just want honest. Her eyes closed, just for a second, like letting the weight of honesty sink in. When she opened them again, they were wet but steady. We sat like that, hands barely touching, not moving, not needing to. The air felt heavy and fragile all at once. Finally, she exhaled. A shaky breath that turned into the smallest smile. Okay. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't an answer to everything. But it was real. And in that moment, it was enough. Time didn't fix everything at once. It never does. We didn't rush into a label. No one made speeches. What changed was smaller. Slower. I noticed it in the mornings, 8:47 a.m., when she'd slip into the cafe on her way to campus. Tea black, no sugar. She always claimed she didn't have time, but she'd stay just long enough for me to finish half my coffee. Sometimes longer. Our conversations weren't about us. Not directly. She told me about grading piles that felt endless, her ex-husband finally giving up on surprise visits. I told her about job interviews, writing drafts that went nowhere. And sometimes we just sat. No words, just the scrape of a chair, the hum of traffic outside, the soft clink of her spoon against the cup. I found out silence can be a kind of language if you listen hard enough. One evening, months later, we ended up back at the same park bench under the crooked lamp. The air was cooler, her scarf pulled tight around her shoulders. She leaned into me, not dramatically, not like the movies, just enough that I felt her weight, her warmth. This feels easier now, she murmured. I nodded. Because we stopped pretending it didn't exist. She smiled, faint but certain. Her hand found mine, not tentative anymore. Just steady. Looking at her then, I thought about that first text, "Don't let me drink alone." About the napkin I'd folded until the edges frayed. About all the times we almost said the thing and didn't. We'd been paused. Stuck between sentences. But sitting there with her, I realized the sentence hadn't ended, it had only waited. Life didn't turn into something perfect. She still worked too late. I still doubted myself more than I admitted. But there was something softer about the days now. Like the edges had been sanded down. Every so often, when she teased me for overthinking, I'd throw her own words back. "Braids define you." And she'd roll her eyes, smile, and answer the same way every time. "Character defines you." Only now, it felt like our private joke. Something that belonged to just us. I don't know if that's love in the grand sense. But I know it's real. And real is enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?